you the news. Printed the info, we gave you the clues. Owners' profits were always sky high. Changing market now threatens our lives. Post-literation, critical reading, dumbed down nation, signs have been reading, TV sucking.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Navel Gazing Valley Indie Podcast. My name is Eugene Driscoll. You can follow the publication on Twitter at Valley Indie or on Facebook, valleyindependentsentinel.org, etc., etc. Before we begin, I wanted to take a moment to thank our sponsor, valleygivesback.org, and to do a live read. This is a live read. This is very exciting for my guests here in the Ansonia office. The best gift builds a better tomorrow. Name a Valley nonprofit in your estate plan and create a legacy that tells future generations what mattered to you. Making a gift that costs nothing during your lifetime is easy and revocable if things change. With a planned gift, Owney, you have the power to impact the Valley forever without affecting your current lifestyle. Your action will inspire others to make a difference in their own way. Remember the Valley. Ask your accountant, financial planner, or attorney about planned giving options. Plan now. Give later, impact tomorrow. Learn more at valleygivesback.org. All right, so this is the post-election babble, I guess we'll call it. My guests this evening on the podcast are Andrew Baklik, who is Mayor Rich Dziekan's chief of staff. Andrew, welcome back to Navel Gazing.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And then making his debut appearance on Navel Gazing is Owney Malerba, chairman of the Derbytown Democratic Committee. Welcome, Owney.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Like I said before, I'm glad to finally make it to the big leagues up here.
This is it. This is it. I made you sit through a live read. It's pretty exciting, right?
Yeah, might as well do it. First time live.
So I thought we would talk about, as I adjust the sound levels here. You know, yesterday was the big election in Derby. We covered Ansonia, Derby, and Seymour, and I thought, I mean, I'm a lone guy, right, at the Valley Indie. I had freelancers helping me out last night, but then they left. You know, they did their thing. They wanted to get the heck out of here. Finally, they never want to see Derby City Hall again. And then I wake up this morning, I got nobody to talk about. I want to talk about yesterday's results and things like that, and what happened, and how did it get that way, and what was surprising and not. So that's my goal today. And if there's anybody out there, this isn't meant to like rehash the campaign or relitigate key points of the campaign. So if you're looking for like a mudslinging fight, it's probably not going to happen. And also, I hear you guys know each other, right? What's the background between Owney and Mr. Andrew Baklik?
Well, to start with, we've been friends for about, I want to say, at least 30 years now, probably more.
Mm-hmm.
So, and ironically, he is, as you know, as you said before, the Republican chief of staff, Democratic town chair. We are friends. We are also neighbors. Literally, I live in right next door to him.
We share a common wall.
Yes.
That's how close to neighbors we are.
So when you're doing like political maneuvering or interviews or something like that, do you whisper?
Close the bathroom door.
Yeah.
Close the bathroom door.
Turn the fan on and all that.
Absolutely.
Yep.
You walk outside. What is that scene in Casino where the guys are outside and they're covering their mouths so the dudes don't see them? Is it all that kind of stuff?
We got to be very careful with all that stuff, but we definitely don't let that spill over to our friendship, which goes back to the days of St. Mary's Church, taking turns ringing the bell. We were both altar boys together. So.
Yeah, did you guys go to the same high school and all that? Are you the same age and all that? So,
exactly.
Yep. We went to
okay.
Started at St. Mary's, St. Michael's, right?
Yeah.
Grammar school, obviously all the way up through high school.
Wow. So I mean, maybe this is, I've had Andrew on before, right? We kind of know how you got involved in Mayor Dziekan's campaign. But it is fascinating to me. Two guys, the same age, grew up together here in Derby, went to school together. The fact that you're both in politics, like where I'm from, that doesn't happen. You know, everyone leaves because I'm from Somers, New York. Unless you're like a hedge fund guy, you can't afford to stay in the town anyway. But there isn't that. Maybe you join the volunteer fire department, but you're definitely not getting involved in people who know the community this much or as well as you guys did. So, Owney, what made you get involved in the Democrats? Because this was your first election, right? This was it.
No, my first was actually my first actual election.
Just hold that microphone a little. Yeah, there
Sorry.
you go.
My first actual election was the primary last year. we had a primary for our state Senate seat.
Okay.
In the 17th Senate seat. So that was actually my first election. And then obviously I was downstairs literally for the Cara Rochelle and obviously Themis's and Nicole Claridis's elections as well.
And then the state, I don't pay attention to that. I'm talking local.
Yes.
This was your first.
This was my first municipal cycle.
Was there more for you to do on the municipal side than those other races?
Yeah, there was definitely a lot more to do. There's because just numbers wise, there's more candidates, there's more people involved. I kind of like it because it's more personal, but
that could have its downsides.
It could definitely have its downside.
Well, and one thing, I mean, obviously, Mayor Dziekan was reelected yesterday, in case you haven't heard, by like 37, 38 votes. It was close. But one nice thing was that, at the end of the night, Brian Coppolo, the Democratic candidate, came over, conceded, shook hands, even made a toast.
Yep. So I was there.
Right. Yeah, that's right. You were. Owney, what are you breaking my chops? Come on. But that didn't happen in some other cities, from what I heard. So what happens now? Now the election's over. How did the two sides come together and govern together? Because the Democrats picked up a couple of seats on the Board of Aldermen.
Obviously this is my first time being in City Hall. Last time we came in from the outside, and I have to say it's a lot easier to throw rocks at that building than it is to defend the fort. You know what I mean? So being in there and having to justify everything that's happened over the last 2 years and explain things, and it's a lot harder when I think you have a record. It's of performance. So I think now I don't think we're really. Of course, it's going to be harder, I think, a little bit for the mayor not having the majority. But I will say we've had the majority for the last 2 years, and never once in 2 years did we have to really exercise that. There was not one thing that was 5-4. That was, we had to use the majority to get something through. And if anything was, say, 6-3 or 7-2, a lot of times you'd see a split vote. You'd see our, quote unquote, our people, the Republican people, would sometimes go against it, and Democrats would be for it. So I honestly am not concerned. We got good people. We have capable, competent people that want to be involved here. I don't personally really care party lines at all, and I think I've made that very clear over the last 2 years, and I think the mayor feels the same way. If you care about Derby, we'll be willing to work together to move us forward. And just to have somebody capable and competent on whatever side of the fence we'd be blessed to have more of those people. So,
Owney, was it tough for you as the head of the Democrats in Derby? Because from what I've observed, the infighting that used to take place on the Board of Aldermen, either between parties, sometimes inside the same party when the Democrats were in charge last time, there was this spirit sort of bipartisanship heading into this election, where the Democrats and the Republicans were pretty much got along, from what I observed on the Board of Aldermen. Did that create a challenge for you? Because you're also, you're the head of the party, but the parties are getting along.
Right. And listen, it's great that the parties are getting along for the good of the city, because at this point, Derby needs it. We're almost at the point of no return here. So that's great. Do I think it was hard? Listen, I knew coming into this, when I finally decided to step up as town chair, that it was part of the deal was uniting the party, is rebuilding really from this bottom up. We have to rebuild the party. And I think we had an opportunity here with Brian being newish, I guess, never really involved in politics before, was the perfect opportunity for us to kind of bring the Democrats back together. I think it was just like a perfect storm for us.
Yeah, and in terms of this election, I mean, I thought, obviously the incumbent, especially a first-term incumbent, I think it's safe to say you assume that is not the underdog, whatever, the favorite. Help me out with my language, guys. Keep in mind, I don't know how to speak, so please interrupt me.
You
all
did
right?
pretty good on that pre-recorded, or
that
live
I could
read.
read a piece of paper in front of me, but that was awkward. But I was surprised at how close this was. I remember about the time where I sent out an invitation for a debate, whenever that was, probably September. I asked Derby and Ansonia at the same time. I asked Derby first. And the thought was kind of like, well, the Democrats are kind of quiet. It was sort of, I got the impression that it's always a bigger risk for the incumbent to agree to a debate because you've got the record while the other guy doesn't have much. You can't throw stuff at him. But then in the last 2 weeks, it seems that like I just kept hearing, well, it's going to be close. And my wife's a Democrat, and on my cell phone, for some reason, my number it comes up her name. So I was getting texts all day long from Brian's campaign.
Yep.
Which I was like, wow, this is kind of sophisticated here. Yeah. I was getting phone calls all day long, and I would just, they say, who am I going to vote for? I would say Chris Bowen, the guy from Seymour. It was like what Brian believes in education and all that good stuff, and I was just like, will you impeach David Leonard? I just kept saying yes. So I don't know if that got around.
That didn't get back. No, that definitely did not get back to me.
I think the guy's name was Josh. My point being, my hypothesis is, the reason this race was so close is because the Democrats had an incredible get out the vote. Involving those texts and making sure, because obviously Democrats have greater numbers compared to Republicans in Derby. How organized were you, and can you tell us all your secrets?
Well, I'm not going to reveal all the secrets because I got to keep some of them. But listen, do I think we had a good operation? Obviously, I think we did a pretty good job. I hope, as my job as town chair is to obviously set it all up. I personally am not as surprised as most people. Being involved as I am, you pick up on things, things. To be fair, and I don't want to bash you here, Andrew. I apologize because I got to go home and I don't want to get evicted.
Bash
but
away.
I have to. There was issues. There was some legitimate issues for the city. And, we can't just push them under the rug. There are problems that need to be solved, and we had an opportunity, and Brian decided to step up. And to be fair, we pointed out those flaws, if you will. So I think, listen, when you lose a close one, you always have to wonder, what did I do? What could we have done? Was there something different I could have set up? But, at the end of the day, we had a plan. I think we executed it pretty well, and we just came up a little short. So.
And then, Andrew, in terms of being someone who works inside City Hall, I mean, you weren't involved in the day-to-day political stuff this year, but the mayor won. But in his speech, who I think Jody Gill, our reporter, covered it. It was subdued. It was kind of like a boxer who had just gone through a 15-round fight when fights were 15 rounds. Yeah. And at the end, the mayor seemed just kind of exhausted, and he won, but he was battered a little bit. Yeah. And that's just me from a video I saw. Was that were you surprised it was as close as it was? And what do you think? What's your take on why it was so close?
So I think there's multiple factors that lead into that. I think the mayor was surprised that it was as close as it was. You hear a lot of people when you go to the doors. He was getting really great feedback, and I know I think Brian was getting great feedback too. And there probably was a pretty even split of people who were happy to see one or the other at the door. But I guess you really never know until the turnout. And once the turnout number started to creep towards 3,000, my feeling was that they were gaining momentum at that point. And I know that there were those, and there's more of them. And I know there were those robocalls going out and those texts, and people were telling me. And I think that, from a campaign perspective, when I looked at the numbers, I think the last time I pulled the financials, the Democrats raised somewhere around 8,000 or 9,000, and the Republicans raised somewhere between 18,000 and 19,000. So you would think that huge advantage would have been, would have shown up. But I think part of it is what they did was almost like with those newspapers. The newspapers for
old
the average,
school,
very old school. And you know what? I have to say, we did that last time. We kind of didn't do. We did this when I ran the campaign in 2017. We went that route with the newspapers. We didn't do that this time, and
which I didn't publish. Somebody on our site said I published.
But
those.
that's the genius.
I apologize for that.
No, there's no apology. It's not.
That's the genius of it. The genius of it is the average person who got a newspaper in the mail for 30 years, who's sitting at home and gets something that they can feel tangible ink in their hand on that same type of print. They assume it's a legitimate periodical, not that it's campaign literature. So when you have $8,000 to spend,
like
you can
Owney
spend.
is completely stone faced as you're
He
saying
knows.
all this.
He knows. Listen. If thing, I learned that last time around. I try to, again, step out of the political world here and be in the administrative part of this. But I watched this all happening and seeing that was an effective tactic that I think a lot of people said, oh, my gosh, this is really happening. This is all true. I think that
you don't think they knew that it was campaign literature? Though,
I don't think that some of the people did. I'm sure, listen.
But how are they then? I'll counter that by asking, how do they manage to get to the polls? I mean, how do you get through everyday life if you don't realize that was campaign literature?
I mean, I look at
it says that on it. It says at the bottom, paid for by.
Right, disclaimer and everything. But again, how many people read the fine print? How many people read the headline? Oh my God, the Valley Gazette's back, or the Valley Sentinel's back, and people were probably thinking, oh, newspaper.
I have copies of it here. That's all the literature.
And the thought of it also is, and that's not a piece that goes right in the garbage. That's a piece that goes on your counter, and you might read it. It might go into your restroom. It might go onto your coffee table, and it sticks around. So do
you think those were effective too? Did you get good feedback on them?
We have nothing but great feedback on them. I haven't really talked to anybody that says, oh my God, this was kind of trash, and just to kind of toss it. Being a letter carrier, I see political mail from every kind of the spectrum all day long. So you kind of know that, this is not your typical piece. And it was part of the plan. So there's one of my secrets for you. That was part of the plan, is to get our message out, to point out, again, sorry, Andrew, to point out the flaws, to point out the issues in the election, by doing that. And it's, I think every resident got one. Actually, I know every resident got one.
How about,
or should have got one.
I got like multiple.
Yes.
And I'm unaffiliated.
Yeah.
What did I cut you off?
No, go ahead, please.
I don't want to. If you're going to give away,
we made sure.
I wish I had beer here.
Working for the post office, you can make sure, and when you're involved in politics, you make sure everybody gets one.
How about in terms of there was no debate in this go around, which when we launched, this thing launched 10 years ago, there was no political debates in the Valley, and they were actively sort of, the two sides would play, I won't say exactly where, they play games with each other. Somebody, because one side always wants to take the higher road and be, well, we asked, I don't know, they wouldn't do it. There's sort of what we saw in Ansonia this year. Right. But do you think? But then I did the Anita Delgado Rich Dziekan debate where we had it old school for the first time in years in public at the high school. I was like, I don't want to do that again. That was too much work. And Andrew's yelling out answers to the candidate.
Yeah, right. You got yelled at by the other guy. That was really the problem.
Right. Yeah. The mayor. Yeah.
17-year-old kid.
Yeah, comes up and starts cursing at me. I think I
did not know this.
Oh yeah. It was.
I witnessed it.
I don't remember. Yeah, I don't remember exactly what it was. Even what prompted. Oh, because there was a guy.
Oh, he wanted to toss somebody out who had been drinking. I think. Right.
Yeah, he was either been drinking or had mental problems.
Maybe both.
But all right, so yeah, right. Well, actually, yeah, if you have a drinking problem, it's technically a mental problem as well, substance abuse. But do you think does that matter though? Do you think could that have made a difference if the two candidates faced each other? And are we now returning to the dark ages of no debates in Derby?
I think now with social media and podcasts and everything, there's a million different ways to get your message out. And I think the first campaign manager that Mayor Dziekan had, Petrino, I think he originally shot an email to the other side to ask for it, never received a response. I have my doubts on if it went to the right person, to be fair. And then when it came, maybe a couple of weeks or months passed, and then there was a second request, I think nobody really had the appetite for it at that time. And I believe from the mayor's point, he's like, listen, I'm walking every day with different people. My schedule is full up. There's no reason for me to stop to debate prep and everything else. Do I think it would have made a difference? I mean, I have my doubts, especially, and I commend Brian or anybody else who wants to get involved in this world, especially when it's your hometown, and as Owney and I have done. But much like when we come in from the outside, what is really your message? It's hard to have a message and a platform, and what are you running on? And the answer, we didn't really ever hear from Brian what that was. And it was really a little bit more of a criticism of what was currently going on. As Owney just said, there were some problems, there were some issues. I think a lot of it was spun in a way in the paper to make it, a little bit sensitive. And again, I'm not trying to be, confrontational, but I think it was spun in a way, and it worked obviously because Keith McLiverty loses by close to 150 votes, and I think he was the kind of the target for a lot of that material.
Maybe we should stop and talk about that, unless you wanted to respond to he said Brian had no platform. I just want to give you a chance.
And let me also say that when I say Brian had no platform, when we ran the campaign 2 years ago, it's very hard to come in from the outside with a platform because, and that segues into a totally other point about the futility of having these every 2 years, because you're just figuring out where the light switches are after 10 months. 6 months later, you got to stop city business to start campaign efforts, and it's counterproductive and it's unfair to the citizens. And I know we both believe, and a lot more people on both sides believe, that this should be a 4-year thing.
Andrew just steering the conversation.
I'm sorry. I'll take
No,
the reins back. I have a
I like
tendency to
it.
do that all
We're
day.
not I'm not a politician. That was a perfect. That was a perfect pivot. It was perfect.
Yeah, it really was. That was admirable.
Plant foot,
But
still on the floor.
yeah, so you're talking about charter revision for the 4-year mayor. Listen, I am all for making it for 4 years. I am.
It is
definitely
interesting
for some kind of charter
because,
revision.
like, 2 years, especially if it's like sometimes you look at I look at Ansonia a little bit, and because all right, so you have personal disagreements a lot that have festered, and then every 2 years you get a chance to smack your enemy, and then it's like 4 years seems like it would be a breather, give people a chance to calm down. The 2-year thing, if you have sort of a toxic political atmosphere, such as in Ansonia, really you wonder how. Do you really feel like you've won? I had somebody message me last night, as you know, when the climate is like it is, do you really feel like this is a win for a community? And it does seem like 4 years might, and then just how in this particular race, and this is suddenly it's the Eugene show, but you get 2 years, and then you have the most bizarre financial mishap in anything I've ever witnessed in 21 years as a reporter happen. Which, and let me add, because I know as from a reporter's side, I'm going along, you're covering stuff, and then suddenly everything stops. Any stories you had planned in the community are all now you're consumed by trying to understand this complicated issue. And to this day, I can't say I honestly even understand what happened or if I reported it. I just tried to get it back to the people as best I could. Did that consume the administration, do you think? Or was it because I know from an outsider, maybe it looked like that?
Yeah, I think I was feeling a lot better about everything that we were doing the first 6 months when we were kind of green and really bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. And then when that kind of came down and we kind of inherited some of that information, and we started to really dig down into the details of that. The mayor's office, frankly, is not really involved in the budget process. Short of, I gave numbers of what my pay was going to be, the mayor's secretary is going to be, and how many staples we were going to need. Short of that, you're not involved in the building of the budget. So then when it came, hey, we got a big problem, and we said, well, let's get some more heads together and try to, figure this out. I have to say, give Keith McLiverty, kudos for this 8-point plan that I know we've heard a lot about, and that a lot of people have their doubts about. But I can tell you through being on conference calls and through multiple interactions with rating agencies and people who are much smarter than I am as it relates to finances, that is something that was really highly accepted by people in the finance community. So I think it's important, and with Mr. Mayhew taking over, that we kind of stay on that path for some of those things, and totally apolitically. I think that is something that I think has kind of been lost here, and I think there was a lot of different negativity slung around about that, but there was a lot of effort that went into, I think, getting us to a place where I think we're confident with the plan to keep Derby above water. We would hate to see, somebody say, well, we shouldn't do this, we shouldn't do this, we shouldn't do this, when those are the representations that have been made to the rating agencies, the state, and the people who are really they listen to things like this. People, it's funny, we were talking to rating agencies and people on important conference calls. They would say, well, I heard the podcast where it was mentioned. I'm like, wow. So they pay attention. So that's why that's kind of what makes me worried about some of the literature and stuff like that.
Hey, we're looking for sponsors.
Yeah, well, damn, yeah, S&P, yeah. So
it's just depressing.
So it was, but it was interesting, and I never really realized that all this stuff is stuff that these rating agencies and people pay attention to when it comes to our financial health, and they want to know that we have a plan and that we're capable of executing that plan. So,
did you want to add anything to that, Owney?
Listen, I don't want to get into this big political thing with you,
but you want to.
No, but to be fair, I feel, among others, that this was an issue that should have been picked up on. It's a big issue. And, we talk about spin, we talk about certain things like that. you can't spin the fact, and I'm just going to be completely honest with you. When it was picked up, Richie was the mayor. Okay? You can't go out in front of Big Y and take credit for it when it started under a previous administration and stand out in front and not take credit for something that happens on your watch, in my opinion. And I think, some of the 8-point plan, listen, I don't want to sit here and bash somebody that's not here to defend themselves. Keith's not here, so I don't want to do it. I wrote a letter.
Yeah,
I know you got some.
And I haven't. I'm going to do this podcast, but I'm going to get it online tomorrow, so I don't have time to. So, but anyway, I don't mean to.
No, that's fine.
You,
so I'm not going to. Go ahead.
You know what? Can I interrupt you though? Because I'm wondering.
Yeah.
Did you hear about it from voters? Did you get a sense? I mean, because there was a tax. I mean, heading into an election year, there was a mill increase, a sewer rate increase. $256 if you're a single family homeowner for the sewer infrastructure that we approved years ago. But I mean, I know on the Valley Indy, people had no idea any of this was coming until they opened their tax bill, because people don't pay attention until it comes. Right. So did you sense this frustration from people?
If I'm being honest,
that you're describing. I'm wondering if you heard it.
Yeah, 100%. Like, obviously, we get feedback when you're out there on the doors specifically, and we're talking to residents, and when we're trying to gauge what the issues are for the city, it all, bottom line is, it all comes down to the taxes, the mill rate. It was obviously, to be fair, was the biggest issue in the campaign. Taxes went up. We talked about the water bills, the sewer bills, and all that. And it's a lot. It's not easy.
Now, how about, what was the biggest surprise of this race to you gentlemen, or did it all go as you thought?
I was surprised. I was surprised that it was 7 votes before we had the absentees there. That was a lot closer. And again, credit for the campaign, the way that it was run to make it that close. Because again, Brian, a political newcomer, but to Owney's point, you go to the doors, people are not happy about the taxes. Yeah. People who are not in the weeds like we are every day doing podcasts and talking about this, all they know is that their taxes went up. So they're going to automatically, to Owney's point, associate that with the current mayor, just like the current mayor is going to go to the Big Y grand opening tomorrow and eat free pizza and cut a ribbon.
Is that actually happening tomorrow?
Yeah, it is.
Big
tomorrow,
Y sends me nothing.
Tomorrow, 1 p.m., November 7th at Big Y in East Derby, and they're giving away a bunch of free stuff too. So come enjoy, and they're open for business.
And shop. All right.
Yeah.
So that's happening. Okay.
So but to Owney's point, you may or may not remember this. In 2017, when Rich ran, he stood out in front of City Hall, had a press conference. Actually, was reading the release from that instance, and he said, the fund balance is dangerously low. We need to make some changes. At that point, he said, it's 1.3 million. Through now going through this whole budgetary issue, it seems like at that point it was actually more like negative 2 million. Mm-hmm. How no one knows that? Again, I'm not a finance guy. I know Owney's not a finance guy. There's a lot smarter people than us who missed this. I don't know how it got missed. I don't know how it got carried forward. All I can tell you is that when we're coming in the door in December of 2017, you're halfway into the previous mayor's budget. So if I said, I think I want to buy, again, let's bring up Staples again. They say, no, your office supply budget is already spent. You got to wait till July to put in for 2,000 Staples. That's where you're at when you walk in. Then you get an audit. You have no idea what the audit findings. Well, I shouldn't say you have no idea. The audit findings said, that's what they've said for 15 years. So is that business as usual? I don't know. I don't have a clue. But I'll tell you, when we were there for a year and then had an audit and said, this is not acceptable, the way that the city has done business financially and the checks and balances that are not in place and the single point failure that exists everywhere. So that was when I think Mayor Dziekan made a decision to step up and make these changes. And again, the genesis of that.
When you say make these changes, you mean the 8-point plan?
Or the 8-point plan and other administrative things that we did in City Hall to kind of make sure that this can't happen again. And I think the bigger thing, rather than talk about the people, it's talk about the next mayor and set that person up for success. The next finance director, the next treasurer. Let's have processes in place that are not flawed, and let's not worry about who the people are. Because again, we have a change that's about to happen. We have a 20-year treasurer who's been doing a lot of the financial stuff in the city through multiple finance directors, who's now going to be gone. I would hate to see that be at the expense of all of us in terms of the administration, but in terms of the residents.
Yeah, that's kind of.
make
Oh,
sure
Owney,
it's a good
what
handoff.
did I didn't? You didn't answer the question. I'm sorry. I was going to talk over you. I apologize. What was the single biggest surprise from your view?
Well, overall for the campaign, I think how. Again, you want to cover your ears for this one?
No,
No,
I'm
okay.
a big boy, baby.
Oh no!
Big boy.
Well, I think
I thought you guys would be
my
talking
biggest-
like trading football stories.
No,
or something
we'll
like
get to
Same
that.
fantasy league. I
end
did
on
beat him
we'll end
this
on
week, by the way.
End on how he did you smoke me in fantasy football
smoked
this
you
week?
in
All
fantasy
right,
on
so
the
we'll
first
end on
place.
that. So, but no, overall, looking back, the biggest surprise, if I'm being completely honest, so you look at the results 2 years ago for Richie, it was pretty overwhelming. I think it was around 500 votes, and you look at the swing this time, and it was we picked up some alderman seats, obviously 6 alderman seats. We picked up, I think, a seat on one of the boards, and one of the boards I believe stayed the same. To see that kind of swing in such a short period of time means that, it really kind of just reiterates what we're saying, and that the people really aren't happy. So, that was kind of one of the biggest surprises to see how kind of far that kind of came back down a little bit.
Now, in terms of, Keith McLiverty, that guy's institutional knowledge of Derby government, Derby City Hall. He was on the middle school building committee. He's on the field committee of the new football field, multipurpose field. That
The pension board, the infrastructure
capital
committee,
planning.
capital planning, all that stuff.
He's essentially anytime somebody has a question at the tax board, it's usually Keith McLiverty who's weighed in for the 10 years that I've covered. So how are you prepping? How's the Dziekan administration prepping for the fact that he is not going to be the treasurer any longer?
Well, I think because of the longevity that Keith had there, I think the treasurer role kind of became like this snowball. It rolled down the hill and got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. I think we need to kind of bring the treasurer role back to baseline of what it's supposed to be. And a lot of the things that Keith did based on his acumen, because of his experience professionally in other places, is going to have to go back into the finance department. And we can't expect a layman who doesn't have that kind of background to step in and be a wealth of financial information. And if you remember 2 years ago, Tony Stafiri ran for treasurer. Yep. Previously, I believe maybe Jen DeRoche, who was Anita Dugato's administrative assistant, ran. The city would be, if it's the traditional treasurer role of sign the checks, it could be the three of us.
In most places,
it is.
It's almost ceremonial,
right?
In places that I've covered.
So I think we kind of need to get back to that. Number one, number two.
But now, I'm skipping ahead. But how's your finance department gonna handle that? Because there's only 1 or 2 people there, and they do HR.
Right. So to me, the transition of that information is very important, and it would be equally important like when you have a new mayor. And I will say Anita and her team were gracious with that information, whether it was Henry Domrod or Jen DeRoche, whoever, to be a handoff. I don't think Keith has any intention of bailing on the city at this point and leaving a deficiency in his wake. So I think we'll have to work about on that, and I hope it's not just a month-long thing. I think we may see Keith into the first quarter of next year still helping with that process, because frankly, he again has absorbed a lot of that over the years, and it's always been kind of a group effort in finance between whether it was the previous chief of staff, whether it was a finance director, whether it was the treasurer, always involved in that. I think we'd be doing a city a disservice if he just exits stage left.
He's almost been a literal crutch that the city has relied on for so much over the years, and to have that taken away will be interesting. How about, can Walt Mayhew serve on the tax board and be treasurer? I put out emails, probably overnight. I asked the city attorney. He wasn't sure off the top of his head, said he'd look into it. Yeah. Walt said he hopes so. He hopes he can do both. The town clerk, I put an email to see if they had any information, but I haven't heard anything.
No, I know, and I think at this point, what he's going to do, Walt, that is just going to kind of like take a few days. You probably hear from him early next week about when he's probably going to weigh his options out and see what he's suited for and see what the situation is, and then you'll probably be hearing about it sometime next week.
Does anybody know what the rules are, though, outside of what he wants to do? Can he? Let's say I want to do both. Is that even?
I personally don't think he can do both, based on the fact that the treasurer is responsible for certain things reporting to the tax board. I don't know how you could. I think it's kind of a conflict, but again, that's my personal opinion. I would have to defer to counsel or whoever.
Yeah,
else.
who even looks it up?
That would be like the Secretary of State, I would think, who has that rule. I would guess.
And the Corporation Council will probably be involved in that. I know Walt and the Corporation Council with that FOI stuff, so I'm sure
they know each other.
Yeah, they know each other. So.
How about in terms of when you first nominated Walt for those two positions back in July? Did you envision this happening? Or did you think there was a chance Walt could win both, or was it because sometimes you go to the campaigns, you're trying to get whoever's in there. Like I signed up once to run for something.
Right.
No, I didn't.
I definitely thought he could win both.
You did?
I do. I think.
Oh wow.
Are you talking ballot-wise numbers on the ticket? Yes, I definitely thought he could, win the treasurer and win on the tax board, strictly because one, Walt, smart, educated guy, is well known around town, has been involved before. We'll go back to this, not just as in the Democratic Party, has been involved in the Republican Party as well, back then. And, he's just a good guy, smart guy. So I had no doubt in my mind that he was capable of winning on both. And that's just not him from top to bottom of the ticket. That's why we built the ticket the way it was.
Oh, see, I'm so cynical. I thought it's just kind of like whoever shows up and you kind of put their name on there. You're just looking for bodies sometimes.
No. We specifically, if you look at our ticket, and I believe
Andrew, why are you shaking your head? Yes, is that what the Republicans do, or you're saying that's what the Democrats do? Or you're just saying?
I'll hold my comments and let my counterpart finish his statement.
No, that's what we did when we were, people getting involved. I know you mentioned it before, how we had some new faces on our ticket and some of our staples. Mm-hmm. That doesn't happen by accident. People that wanted to get involved, because I feel it's kind of time for that. It was time to get these new, fresh faces involved. But Walt felt passionately about it. So
gotcha.
So when in a small city,
I had the wrong assumption.
It wasn't just, hey man, do this.
We need a line on. We need a name on this.
No. I don't need a line.
That's interesting.
So,
Mr. Baklik, is there?
I think that we struggle in Derby sometimes to find a cross section of capable and willing people to be involved in civic duty like this and volunteer work. I commend Owney, for instance, for doing what he's doing. We don't have the same ideologies, but I'm getting paid to do what I do, and I oftentimes feel like it's very thankless, and I've said that publicly before.
That is, I'm getting paid to be here.
I don't know. Being town chair is volunteer.
Yeah, and you're nuts.
Yeah,
I think it's nuts to even consider doing that. But you gotta like it.
You do.
I don't like politics. It's kind of silly to say.
Sometimes it could be tough.
It
could be tough. It could be draining. And if I came back for Walt real quick, sure. And I am grateful to him too, because the treasurer did switch parties on us. In case you didn't know, he did, did not just upset some people within the Democratic Party. I could tell you that upset some people within the Republican Party as well, that he kept going back and forth. So
he's not here to defend himself.
No, I know. So I'm not gonna continue on that. So I am grateful for Walt for, he felt passionately, wanted to do it, and he stepped up. So.
And when's the inauguration?
I believe that I just saw an email come through. I think it's December 7th.
December 7th. Okay. Yeah. And then in terms of the alderman races, were there any? I guess the alderman races are always sort of. I can never. Yeah. It's hard to know who's gonna. You just know Ron Sill's probably always gonna be there.
Ron Sill's gonna be there forever.
He's been alderman for as long as I can remember.
And again,
he's like Johnny Carson. There's something like just timelessly cool about Ron Sill.
Magnanimity in politics disarms your opponents, and Ron has that down very well. He's a nice guy. He's a likable guy. He's always willing to help. He's always listening to his constituents. So Ron's a good example of that. I look at
I agree.
Jim DiMartino. Shout out to Jim DiMartino. Got the most votes in the third ward. He got I believe 780 and change. I mean, really walked and hit the pavement. I was joking with him because he's kind of a beefy guy. I said, were you going with like tank tops and threatening people that they don't vote for you? But he's done a great job in his first 2 years. So to Owney's point, I'm really happy that we've got some kind of new people step up to get involved. I mean, it's great that we have the older crowd, not older, but a more experienced crowd kind of to shepherd some new people in.
I agree.
Because I think we kind of need that in every place in the city to start to think about a changing of the guard. I always talk about Jack Walsh. Jack Walsh is involved in a million things, the Greenway, the this, the that. Who is going to pick up the mantle when Jack Walsh says, I'm done with this? So, we have some very capable, competent people on the WPCA board now that are learning from Jack. And I hope that if and when Jack's ready to retire from that, he hands it off to somebody who is capable and competent, not just, the mayor's cousin wanted to get involved, we threw him on there, and or whatever's been done here historically. Because you own those people, whether they take union jobs, whether they jump on as appointed board members. I think we need to do a better job of really being thoughtful about who we select for those things.
I also think that kind of goes back into, if I may, I'm sorry, you all set?
I'm done.
To go back a little bit into the charter revision and getting for 4-year terms. It's tough in a small town to get people to turn out sometimes, not just for running on the office, to volunteer for these campaigns, the whole 9 yards. It's draining because election year is not every 4 years or every 2 years. It's every single November we have an election, no matter it's municipal, presidential, congressional, whatever it is. So I think, to your point, getting other people involved, I think once we change the charter, I think we have opens it up a little bit more to get more people involved. I really do. Because it's draining. It takes a lot out of people. They don't want to have to deal with it getting peppered with the phone calls, like you said, and the text messages.
Those didn't bother me, though. I loved it.
All right.
It's
good to know.
But do you think, because I'm thinking, all right, yeah, you guys will do charter revision and put these proposals on there, and they'll all be just soundly rejected because no one wants to change anything when push comes to shove. Do you think voters will actually buy into it?
I do. And it'll get done if there's consensus, to use a political word here for you. If we are united, the Democrats, Republicans, or unaffiliated, whoever is on the Charter Revision Committee, it has to be done, first of all, it can't be rushed. It has to be done properly. Put it together right. Make sure we have people on there that want to do it, not just kind of hey, we want to do Charter Revision. If we can get everybody united on that committee, to be honest with you, you'll get a lot more done than just 4-year terms. Whatever you think needs to be updated in the charter, whether it be 4-year terms, 2-year, full-time, if you want. I know that's one of the issues, full-time mayor, you want to put that in there. But you have to be united on that. That's one thing that needs to be done.
And do you think Mayor Dziekan has reached across the aisle in the last 2 years? I mean, my impression, because people aren't fighting like they were. It seems like he's not a guy actually, you guys don't even, I'm looking at Andrew Baklik. It's not like we get press releases all the time, every time, it's almost like he might be too quiet, I guess, now that I think about it. But do you think he's done that to some extent? Do you expect him to? To
a certain extent, it's always easier to say, we're going to be bipartisan when you have control, to be fair, if I'm being honest. It's always easier to say that. So, like I said, Richie's not here to defend himself, so I'm not going to bash him.
Although the Democrats on the Board of Aldermen are not pushovers,
no, they're seasoned. Yeah, they've all been around. Camille, her brother was the mayor, so she has some
Grande, right?
Yeah, she was
Great
Richie Grande. Yeah.
Oh wow, Grande.
So,
sorry. Okay.
Yeah.
I got to say, coming in from the outside, we preached bipartisanship before we had powers, and I think we stuck to that. But I will also say that I think I saw some things about lack of transparency. If we were guilty of anything, Eugene, to your point, lack of press releases. We don't have Twitter. We don't have Instagram. We're not really getting our message out to. And I think, Rich, there's something I think that could have helped the mayor.
Because, he did say we have to communicate.
We got to communicate better. And it's not that we're trying to keep anything from anybody. It's just when you're in there for the first 2 years and you're still trying to figure out where the light switches are and how to control the heat.
I was amazed that, Big Y is opening tomorrow. I was amazed that Mayor Dziekan didn't have something beforehand saying here it is. He almost seems like he's almost, I don't want to say apolitical, but he doesn't seem like he's what am I trying to say?
Well, to Owney's
he
point-
almost shied away from it.
Well, we could have
but then
politicized it.
Owney would have.
Owney's right. Who owns it? Does it need to own it? No. You know what the bottom line is? It's a private deal between a private developer. The only thing that any mayor could do, and our administration did this, was when they came in for permitting and things like that, we had a meeting around the aldermanic chamber table that filled up that entire table all the way around with everybody they needed: the city engineer, P&Z, the fire marshal, the building inspector. That's the best thing we could do to help facilitate Big Y's. We could streamline the land use process for them, and we could help them with anything else they might need. Short of that, nobody's calling Big Y corporate office, say, hey, we got this great grocery store down here. That's DLC management and the people who manage that plaza. Now that they're here, we can start to court some other retailers, some other people to fill up that plaza, and that's an economic development function. But again, the mayor at $45,000 a year, part-time gig, and we don't have Instagram, we don't have Twitter. When do you have the time to do all that stuff? We're going to have somebody else, maybe volunteer, to start to help get our message out better. And you do a great job, Eugene, covering all the towns here, but sometimes we don't have time to sit there and say, hey, by the way, not only did we just do this, let's tell everybody we just did it. We barely have that time.
What about, maybe this is my last question, given the finances, state of finances, everything having to do with Derby finances was such a major campaign issue, has the city given any thought to setting up a webcam or to broadcast boat meetings or alderman meetings to try to shed more light on the budget process every year? Because every year it kind of goes into the basement, and it's people dedicate hours and hours and hours of their lives every year to putting together a budget. Yeah. But there's also a long tradition of not exactly living in the spirit of the FOI Act in terms of meeting minutes when it's a workshop. Not really more of a problem a few years back. But now that there's been this issue with finances, and everyone's talking about finances, would the city consider something like that?
I mean, I can't speak for that board. I would have no problem with that. I think it's the 21st century. I would love if we had the means to really have better technology citywide. I told you before when we walked in, my PC has been completely down, motherboard fried for about a week and a half. And I was kind of waiting to see the election results to see if I was going to purchase one to my liking or let the next person do it. So that's the kind of where we're at. We're always kind of hamstrung financially. So, are we going to be able to get a webcam to put in the basement of City Hall to live broadcast? And then who's going to set it up? We have no IT department. We have no IT presidents. That's why we rely on you, Eugene, to come and live stream. And
people do watch it.
People do watch it and comment. I watch it sometimes when I'm in the room just so I can make silly comments.
The comment sections, yes.
Comment sections are comedy gold around here.
Anyway, is there any, Owney, did you want to have the last word here? Is there anything you wanted to wrap up on, or maybe there's a point you wanted to revisit? Anything you want to say? The floor is yours.
No, I think I kind of touched on it a little earlier, and listen, I think this election was telling. It was telling, as I mentioned earlier. We saw the change in the win numbers and the totals on the boards and everything, and you know what? The people aren't happy. I think it's very obvious. The people that were beat up here. So we need to do a better job, whether it be economic development, figuring out the finances, because the higher the tax rate goes, the mill rate goes, unfortunately, there'll be less and less of us here. They're going to start to leave. You can only hold on for so long before I say, you know what? I've been here for so long, but I just can't afford to be here. And we don't want to see that anymore.
Now, I'm anticipating someone's going to hear that. So I'm going to get emails being like, you Driscoll, you son of a, you aligned, blah, blah, blah. What about, how do you guys work together now? Because isn't that what Derby needs more than anything? Since it's such a small city, the not to say that you went negative, but I'm just almost paranoid now because there's almost like a fragile, now that the election just happened. Like, how do you guys, don't you need to come together in some way?
For the good of the city?
And you sort of have.
We have to work together.
We have.
I think so. I mean, listen, we have a unique situation. Like me and him, it's different. It's not something you would see probably any place outside of the Valley, to be completely honest with you.
Yeah, it's very
I mean,
unique.
you have to just call it how it is. Like, and I'll speak for me and Andrew, but, we tend not to really get into huge political debates.
Yeah, is this the most you guys have ever talked about local politics? In
Probably.
Real City?
Probably. This is probably the most.
Probably.
Yeah,
We
most
talk
back
fantasy
and forth.
football, and we talk
Yeah.
about our families and that kind
We
of
talk
stuff,
about-
and that's what
yeah.
life is really about.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, we have a duty to the citizens here to kind of get us out. And
Yeah.
Owney makes a good point about the things. He's absolutely right. We need to worry about the tax rate going up to make it unsustainable. We have to worry about economic development.
To make it sustainable.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's
you don't
it's
wanna-
becoming unsustainable.
That'll be a
but-
campaign flyer in a couple of
exactly.
years.
But listen, part of
Baklik
it
says make it unsustainable.
Yeah, make it sustainable. Exactly. Sorry, I misspoke. I'm tired. But yeah,
That's
I mean,
on
3
record.
years of no tax increases, and just to touch on that real quick without being political, I think the tax board, in their defense, was doing what they thought was best for people, and that is not raise your taxes. They did that for 3 years with a false sense of security, thinking there was more money than there was. You find out there isn't, and then in an election year, they're left with the very difficult, tenuous decision of having to raise them.
Right.
So they did it. I mean, they could have been political and say, "Oh no, we're not going to raise them. We don't want to do that this year. We'll do it next year, and we'll go up twice as much." So it had to be done. It was I think a responsible decision. I know nobody likes it. To your point about the sewer use, we got 18 apartment units my family owns, 257 per unit. You do the math. It was painful to write that check this year. But it is what it is. We kicked the can in this city for so long that it lands on whoever that current mayor's lap is. It becomes political fodder for the campaign against them. And instead of you having 4 years to prove yourself that, hey, I can get us out of this, you got 2, and you start defending the castle,
Yeah.
All right, gentlemen. I have nothing to add. Thank you both so much for coming down
Let's
here.
do a fantasy football one next
And
time.
Yeah, let's-
well,
we
that,
could
you
do-
guys have to run that. I don't know.
I don't know anything about that.
I wear a
Little
New York
fantasy.
Yankee hat. I haven't watched a baseball game since
Play a little video
1986.
games or
Yeah,
something.
something.
Figure something out.
Oh yeah, I'm big on Friday 13th and Fortnite on PS4. So.
We're Destiny guys.
All right, guys. Thank you.
Thank you,
Rob,
Eugene.
thank you.
For hundreds of years we brought you the news. Printed the info, we gave you the clues. Owners' profits were always sky high. Changing market now threatens our lives. Post-literation, critical reading, dumbed down nation, signs have been reading. TV sucking ideas from our head. Public discourse just about dead. We'll ride the dinosaur. Yeah, ride the dinosaur. Our readers are in the opens each day. Online clickbait, a prurient way. It's free information here to stay. Not even hookers give it away. Advertising, metastasizing, newsroom shrinking, constant attrition. We'll ride the dinosaur. We'll ride the dinosaur. We'll ride the dinosaur. Yeah, ride the dinosaur. Deadlines, bylines, pictures too. Editorial comment for a buck or two. Fire down the block, the murder next door. And now we wonder what it's all for. Social media coming free to you. Funny pages, the mayor's wages, criminal seats, corruption schemes, ink state wretches asking tough questions. We'll ride the dinosaur. Yeah, ride the dinosaur. The presses are running all through the night. We're printing the truth with all of our might. We're platform agnostics, got that interweb too. Malerba fans, we're here every day, so give us a chance and we'll make an art stand. Just hold us in your hand, yeah, and we'll ride the dinosaur. Yeah, ride the dinosaur.